Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group with your end of day recap for Wednesday. Thank you for joining me for this. I've actually haven't had a couple of these in the last couple of days. I was away for a few days. Somebody just asked me, they're like, "Hey, where's your end of day videos?" And they're like, "Were you traveling or something?" And yeah, I was away. I was away the end of last week, and then I had to leave a little bit yesterday. For a dentist appointment. So I am back for the end of day. So we'll start with NBIX. We got long this name. No, I'm just kidding. This is a nice earnings beat. It's up to 74. So just to kind of summarize today's moves after the close, a lot of names reported earnings today, and it's a little bit different than the pattern that we've been seeing recently. So it's not that bad. But some momentum names are down a little bit. Tesla had some bad numbers, as well as deliveries, as well as funding. So a whole bunch of things going on there. Um, a lot of bad guidance. A lot of companies reporting good numbers for their recent quarter, but guiding down considerably. Corvo is another one. KHC is down pretty hard. So you got a handful of names warning about their next quarter, or just didn't meet the higher expectations. And I think for this quarter so far, we've had a number of names that have just kind of blown the roof off of expectations. But today it doesn't seem to be the case for that. Qualcomm is still up. Facebook is right around 184. So we did put on an earnings trade, or I put on an earnings trade for Facebook, where I thought the option move was implying a little bit too much of a move. I think, let's see, I actually forget what it was. What was it, 6%? Let me go over to my earnings section. It was expecting a 5.3% move. So Facebook hasn't done that in a long time, not since last year where it actually went down 5.6%. So the last three quarters, Facebook hasn't moved that much. So I looked to fade the move. I sold the 185 190 call spread, and I also sold the put spread as well. So as long as it stays under 186 at 185, I'll be okay with that trade. But Shack, I think, is just out with some numbers too. They're selling off a little bit too. But so that's a couple of the names that reported earnings after the close, and just to talk about today's overall price action, I would say it's we've seen this pattern now several times. Let me just go through there. I feel like there's a bunch of other names. FireEye was another big miss. I knew there was another big miss. FireEye. The cybersecurity names have been really difficult. Symantec also down. Almost looks like the identical move. GoPro, which is a little bit different, obviously, different company than the cybersecurity numbers. So got cybersecurity names down to 957. So again, as I'm going through a lot of these names, only a couple of them are up, and Facebook is still kind of coming in here a little bit. But great numbers by Facebook all around. I went through their numbers, and they looked pretty stellar. But it's just the fact that and why I didn't play them long is because they've had a huge run up. So here's their numbers: 159 versus 158 on the EPS. Revenues also beat. Monthly active users, daily active users, both beating expectations. Oh, another name that I am long is CF, and it looks like that's actually come in a little bit, but good numbers for CF Industries. So the overall market, this is what's been going on. If we look at maybe IWM, it seems like whenever we're bid up pre-market. Now, granted, we should have been bid up because look at what the rest of the world did compared to us. The Nikkei was up 1.8%. The Hang Seng was up 1.32% last night. I mean, these are big numbers. Look at the DAX was up 1.8% today. That's a huge move. Even though just Euro stocks were up about 65 basis points, but still, so it does make sense why we were bid up a little bit pre-market. But I'm telling you, and I tweeted this out earlier, this has been the pattern recently. You just can't get trapped. I know day traders sometimes like to look at the first 5 minute bar or the first 10 minutes, and then look for some momentum. But anytime that we've been bid up pre-market in the last 3 weeks. I don't know what that print is on IWM, but anytime that we've been bid up going into the open, I mean, this would have been a great sell. I did not do this. I think except for yesterday, and I looked at doing this yesterday, and I just decided not to do it. But at the very least, I think this was yesterday in the Qs. We did the same thing. We were bid up. We sold off for the first half hour, and then we were able to kind of get over it. The Qs did not do that today. This was the open, and it was just a all throughout the day. Maybe the last 2 hours after the Fed meeting, which really was a non-event, which is exactly what we expected. But it's just been a massive fade whenever we're bid up. So this happened again. I think a few days ago as well. But I'm very wary of when that happens. So is it the end of the world? Is it a big reversal day? IWM was up, started the day up about 50 basis points and finished down, underperformed. It does look like IWM, which we've been talking about this week, is kind of your must watch. It looks like it's more than, this is basically the whole month. It's done nothing. So it had this great move up. The momentum was behind it, and it's continuing to kind of crater, and it's not, if it stops here, that would be fine, and then manages to go back up. But the fact that IWM is in starting, it's kind of 2 out of 3 days where we've had some big down days. Now we didn't close on the lows, so it's being saved on this one, and this one. But we'll see what happens. But it definitely looks like it's on the border of breaking down here, right at that red line, right at the top of value. So that's what I'm most concerned with. Again, you always have to remember what the biggest weight of is in IWM. It's banks, it's financials. That's the biggest. That's the largest weight by far in IWM. And I think people lose sight of that, so I bring it up quite a bit. If we go to the description of IWM, so you could see for yourself rather than take my word for it. But banks are almost 10%. And then also, if you look, you got REITs. So you add REITs and you add banks, and you got 20% of the ETF. Or 20% of IWM is financials. 10% is banks. So you have to look at rates. So when TLT rallies, when TLT rallies like it did today, it did finish off the highs, but it's going to be tough sledding for the banks. So you really have to be mindful. If you're trading the banks, if you're trading the financials, you have to have one eye on bonds. And I think more so than in years past, because let's face it, the banks aren't making as many revenues as they used to be on the trading side. So I think they're more sensitive to the move in interest rates. So when TLT goes up, interest rates go down, and that's been generally bad for the banks. So that's going to bring down your small caps. In terms of the best performers, what is really interesting to me is the move in oil. It did actually finish flat for the day. So these Department of Energy number days are pretty difficult. I kind of sold the news that it got bid up yesterday on the API numbers that came out at 4:30. And then it's like almost a sell the news. So it actually, I don't know if this is a reversal day here on oil. It did hit that VPOC that we've been talking about. So sometimes we do see a reversion. Be careful of that the next couple days. I've been just waiting. I wrote about going long energy over the weekend. I think this looks great. I think the chart, in terms of support, you know exactly where this trade is not going to work in XLE. You got the 200-day moving average right there. So you can get into a trade, and you don't have to be that afraid. So I don't know what I'm waiting for, because you know exactly where to get out of this thing. If it turns and goes below, what is this? What's this line? What's this number here? Right around 67.70. Breaks below that, that's not really a big loss, and you can get out very, very quickly. So that's the plan for energy names, and I think a lot of people are going through these charts. CLR, which I had heard from someone in a webinar, so I don't want to take this say that I'm credited for finding this, but you have a lot of names like this. This one we were long and I got out of because I didn't want to deal with earnings, but Oxy I think looks pretty good. There's a number of them I think that are now just above the 200-day moving average. So I think really that's most interesting. If you're looking for a little bit more momentum than XLE, XOP is your name. Look at all these purple lines up here, which could act as targets. So XOP was up, ended up up 3% right on the highs. So that could be, while the semis group is starting to look a little tired to me. I don't know if that's a reversal bar. We'll have to see. We're really not getting much volatility in the semis group, other than watching a couple names and watching some names see some put buying. Skyworks, there's a big weekly put buyer today. So I think you just want to be cognizant that this eventually might start to break down a little bit. I don't think there was any earnings that really drove it down, but be a little bit mindful of that. The Chinese internet names, which we've talked about these a lot, and again, BABA reports tomorrow, which is about 11% of this KWeb Chinese internet ETF. They report tomorrow morning. They had a nice move today, as they should, with the Hang Seng up last night, so up 1%. JD looks interesting to me here, but it just has been having trouble getting going. Was a green bar earlier and kind of faded, and we saw more short dated puts go up towards the middle of the day in JD.com. Metals and mining kind of gave back some of their gains as well. You can see they tried to go higher and kind of failed for the day. And then kind of getting going over to the worst group, or one of the worst groups, which is biotech. Biotech, we talked about this in the room yesterday. Friday's bar, nice green bar to kind of reverse this crazy consecutive red down bars. So we had this nice move on Friday. Try to go higher on Monday and failed. Try to go higher again, got to Monday's high and failed again at the 50-day moving average. And then today started the day higher again, looking like it was ready to rally, and just can't go. It's getting sold off. So there's sellers in there who are hitting it pretty hard. And there was a sharp, aggressive put buyer yesterday right at this. Right at that. Notice again, VPOC taken out and a move to the downside. All right, so that's enough. I can go on and on because there's tons of different movers to go on. But the main thing is as far as taking positions right now, I'm waiting either to the middle of the day or to the end of the day. And I'm not really day trading as much, especially when we start up 20 or 30 basis points. It can be very frustrating for people who, aren't looking to sell on the opening print, and we just head lower the rest of the session. Small bounce at the end of the day, but lackluster bounce. Go back to IWM for a minute. So sell off all through the session. Lackluster bounce. From the lows. So it's crazy because we're on 52-week highs, but it's still a challenging market. It's a grind higher market. But unless you kind of put the exposure on the day before and are willing to sell on the opening print, I would say it's a little bit. You don't get much more opportunity. You get maybe a little bit more opportunity to kind of sell in here before the bottom fell out for IWM. Again, SPOO's not that bad. Much smaller range. Still finished, I think, up on the day, which was here, but actually we see futures down back on the low of the day. So there you go. All right, thanks for watching today's video. We'll be back at it tomorrow morning. We'll go over all the earnings plays pre-market ahead of the opening bell tomorrow at 8:50 in the morning. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.